What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer for BamaOnLine, and we got a three-person box here today. Exciting stuff at BamaOnLine. Of course, joined by Jimmy Stein, as I am every time we've been on here so far. But now we got a new guy. We got Blake Byler joining the staff. I know Tim White's kind of hinted at that in the last show, but now we're going to kind of do a first day of school introduction with Blake and make him feel real uncomfortable. So, Blake, welcome to BOL. Happy for you to be here, man. What's it been like so far?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been enjoying getting adjusted and getting on the message board, doing the AMA to Ask Me Anything. Enjoyed seeing people's responses to that and everything. But it's been good. I've enjoyed it and ready to continue as the season get ready to start here in a couple days.
I know you kind of did a jump scare for some people on the board when you said what year you graduated. So for the people in YouTube land, just tell them a little bit about you from a background standpoint and what they can look forward to.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Alabama. I grew up in Hoover, right outside of Birmingham. I went to Alabama. I graduated in 2023, majored in journalism, communications. I interned for a little while, and I've been covering Alabama in some form or fashion since about 2021. Did a lot of intern worked for the CW while I was at Alabama, which I know Charlie did as well. I worked for Bama Central for a little bit out of college, also interned with them while I was in college, and now have made the jump over here. Really excited to continue my coverage. And I think just all the experience that I've been able to gain in college has really helped me be able to get ready for this position and continue my coverage here.
Yeah, I mean, I joke about Blake's age, but he and I sat together courtside in LA and in Phoenix for Alabama's Final Four run and came away really impressed. I mean, I've known Blake for a little bit, been with him in several stops along the football season on the road, but really got to see him working close up during basketball season late in the year. And it was really good stuff. So I think he adds a lot to the BOL staff. And so does my man, Jimmy. We're not spring chickens like Blake, but I know Jimmy, we've been talking about the scrimmage on the message board. So I think that's where I kind of want to start with this. Just you posted some great stuff on the BOL Roundtable. I really suggest people that haven't checked that out to do so. But maybe what was your biggest takeaway from the stuff you were able to gather from Saturday's second and final scrimmage?
Yeah, I think, the defensive intensity, Kalen DeBoer mentioned it himself. Prescott said it was the most physical scrimmage that he's been a part of here at Alabama. More than one watcher told me that it was jarring almost in terms of how physical it was. And you don't normally, scrimmages it's one of their opportunities to do some full tackling. I mean, they don't always do that in the everyday practices. And it is an opportunity to sort of let loose on your teammates a little bit. But my understanding is it was a rare level of physical intensity. Seems like Kane Womack's group wanted to kind of send a message to both the offense and even to the world that they're going to be some hitters. I mean, I heard some specifics about it, but they got after the quarterback really well. There were turnovers. It was a good day for the defense, but they did not shut the offense out. The offense matched them with some explosive plays, particularly in the pass game. Rico Scott, of all people, had multiple touchdowns from what I heard. And I'm not sure that's something we're expecting. But Ryan had another big catch. Wasn't a touchdown, but Ryan had another big play. So I think the offense had its moments, but the real takeaway for me, guys, was just overall defensive intensity, which is a little surprising.
Yeah, that's my biggest takeaway too, and it was shocking to me. And I'm going to throw this back to both of you guys because when we heard from Kalen DeBoer after the first scrimmage, he talked about how this second one was going to be shorter. He talked about the importance of staying healthy, and the physical practice and staying healthy, they don't really jive together in terms of you're trying to come to the common goal. But I think hearing that, seeing what Jimmy posted on the board, hearing from other people as well, and then also just seeing what Alabama put on social media with some of the big hits that they had on camera, it was surprising because you are 2 weeks away from game week. You don't want to have any unnecessary injuries from that. It doesn't sound like, for the most part, any guys really suffered anything. I know a guy like Cole Adams was on the receiving end in a couple of those hits. Kudos to him for getting back up. But for you guys, was it a little surprising to hear that, given how close we are to game week? I'll start with you, Jimmy.
Yeah. I mean, because staying healthy is so important. I was asked going in, what do you expect, from the scrimmage? What would you like to see? My first answer was good health, because we're coming off a week where Texas lost their top 2 running backs.
Right.
A&M loses their starting running back. And then I was asked the question, what do you want to see in the scrimmage 10 minutes after I saw the Vikings lost J.J. McCarthy, was streaming across my TV when I was like, what do you want to see Saturday? I'm like, all the Alabama players upright at the end of practice. So it is a little surprising that it was that intense, but I think it's a good sign myself, because I'll be completely honest here. DeBoer in the new offense, and again, this isn't a complaint, but a worry that I would have for Alabama is when you're bringing in an offense and you're going to throw it around a lot. Let's remember Michael Penix led the nation in passing yards. I worry a little bit about defensive intensity if every single day they're facing a lot of throws. I think what really makes a defense physical is defending inside runs every day in practice, and everybody just kind of knocking pads and everything's real physical because there's a lot of inside runs. I worried if it's a lot of throwing that maybe the defense slacks off a little bit. They sent a message that there's been no slacking off at all. And kind of, from what we've heard from the scrimmage, it's sort of some vintage Saban type things you might hear from a Saban scrimmage, frankly.
Yeah, it was. But for you, Blake, when you heard Coach DeBoer, it's kind of one of the first things he said in that post-scrimmage press conference, that it was the most physical scrimmage that they've had, not even just this preseason, but dating back to the spring. Did that kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit?
It definitely raises my eyebrows. Honestly, I think it's kind of an encouraging thing, and it kind of, I think it gives off the sense that these players kind of have the same sense that the fans do, and that they're eager to get to the season, and they're eager to hit somebody that's not wearing a script A on the other side of the field. But I think it really shows that I feel like this defense, based off of what we heard, is really taking on kind of the mentality of their defensive coordinator, Ken Womack. And I mean, we've all three been on the practice field and we've all been in interviews, and Womack is a fiery personality, more so than DeBoer, maybe more so than anyone else on the staff. And I think to have a defense that kind of takes on the mentality of the defensive coordinator in that way is really encouraging whenever you're looking at kind of like Jimmy said, some of those vintage Saban era teams, they had nasty defenses. That's what they were known for. You didn't really get into this high powered offensive stuff until later in his tenure, when kind of college football called for it. So with Kalen DeBoer coming in, you have an offensive head coach, and I don't think anybody has necessarily been concerned that the offense is going to be dynamic. That's kind of been the assumption, and everywhere Kalen DeBoer has been, you have good offenses that can put up 35, 40, even 45 points a game with the right personnel. So with all the losses that you had on the defensive side of the ball through the transfer portal and whatever else coming into this year, I guess your question mark, so to speak, is you assume Alabama can score if they have Kalen DeBoer running this offense with all of their talent. But if you have a defense that's kind of playing physical and bringing an upper level of physicality to even a scrimmage, I think that's really exciting and encouraging whenever you get into the season. So these guys aren't going to lay down necessarily. They're going to bring that same kind of intensity when there's not other Alabama players on the other side of the field.
No. Yeah, I think it is encouraging. It's just is a little surprising at the end of the day. But another surprising element, Jimmy, you kind of touched on this, is some of the plays of the young wide receivers. I think that group is, Ryan Williams. We've talked about Ryan Williams a lot on this show, on the side. It's going to continue. But, those freshmen, whether it was the first scrimmage with Caleb Odom and some of the plays he made, but then Rico Scott kind of be a surprise contributor in that second scrimmage. Just what was your takeaway from that and what you heard about the young guys?
Yeah, good things. I mean, it appears to be a deep group, maybe deeper than we even expected it to be. I would think in terms of, I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but we haven't heard much the last week to 10 days or so out of Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law, maybe two guys we expected to sort of headline that group, along with the Washington transfer, Jeremy Bernard. It's a little more quiet out of K-Law and Kobe Prentice, while younger guys like Ryan, like redshirt freshman Cole Adams, like Rico Scott in the scrimmage have sort of stepped up. We've heard, obviously, Caleb Odom made a spectacular catch a couple of weeks ago. So these young guys sort of stepping up. They're probably getting a lot of opportunity because they do throw the ball around quite a bit. So I think there is some opportunity out there. And I'm not saying that, hey, we're not going to see Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice. I actually fully expect to see them play as many snaps as anyone once the games start. But it has been noticeable to me lately, especially, that maybe a little less Prentice, a little less Law, maybe trying to get these younger guys more work. You got to figure out how many you're going to use in the first team rotation. I know a lot of people like, hey, play them all. That's fun to stick all those freshmen out there and play 9 or 10 guys. But if you're playing 9 or 10 guys in your first team rotation, it can be a close game in the second half and you need to make a play and you look up and your 5th, 6th, and 8th best players are on the field when you really need your best dudes on the field when it's time to decide the game at the end. So really having a bunch of guys in the first team rotation isn't necessarily a great idea.
No, I think you're right. I think also too, we've heard this multiple times under Coach Saban that this second scrimmage, you're trying to figure out the guys that you're going to play. And I think that I don't know if I expect to see Rico Scott in this offense and as a true freshman. I really don't know how much we'll see of Caleb Odom, just because, like Jimmy said, like you want to kind of tighten up that rotation as much as possible. Even though we haven't heard a ton from them as far as it goes from a playmaking standpoint, you have Jeremy Bernard, you have Kendrick Law, you have Kobe Prentice. Those are your top 3 guys, or expected top 3 guys. Then Emmanuel Henderson's had a great preseason. You have Cole Adams, who's done some good things. Ryan Williams is going to play. That's 6. Then you wonder where did the next group of guys come from? Because you haven't mentioned a guy like Jaron Hamilton. Jalen Hill, if Hill's healthy, he would be in that mix. So you got to figure out how many of these guys are going to play. But I think it is encouraging, too, that these young guys are making plays, because I think establishing depth there is important, because it's a group that, while Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice have played before, you need those young guys who haven't played to be ready if their number's called. So I think the development of this wide receiving core is fascinating to see how it plays out. I think that's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to later in this week whenever we get back out on the practice field. But for you, Blake, when it comes to these receivers, the maturation development of these young guys, what do you make of it, and what do you think of the group as a whole?
I think this receiving group is really interesting because I remember at SEC Media Days, SEC Network would put their graphics up of your leading returning passer, rusher, and receiver. And at receiver, it was Kobe Prentice with, I think, about 350 yards. And when you think about how dynamic Alabama's receiving room has been over the past 7 to 8 years, it's really strange to see a returning receiver being under 400 yards as the leading returning receiver on the entire team. I don't know really the last time that's happened, because you've had so many explosive players that are returning year after year. So this group as a whole, I think it's good to see you have young guys that are developing and making plays that really confirms, so to speak, the depth that there is in this group. Because for the outsider, the casual college football fan that's looking at this roster, you look at the receivers and somebody could think, man, where did all of Alabama's receivers go? They don't have anybody that I've heard of. And obviously we followed the team more closely than that, so we know these guys are talented. So it's good to see them showing that. I mean, you look at Prentice, he's a guy who started a little bit as a freshman and has played significant snaps, but hasn't really had those big game-breaking performances. Kendrick Law is a guy who's been spoken highly of by both Saban's staff and this staff. But I don't even know if he has 20, 25 career catches. He's just been very underutilized. And then you've got Bernard coming in, who's a guy who was the 4 at Washington, and he was still fairly productive. I think he had more receiving yards when you're comparing than Prentice did. But he was behind 3 and a top 2-round NFL draft picks at Washington. So there's a lot of talent here, just a lot of guys that haven't really had the chance to see the field. But the fact that these young guys are also performing well in these scrimmages, whether it's Ryan Williams, who I'm sure we all think is going to be a very good player, Caleb Odom, who has a lot of potential, even guys like Rico Scott. You mentioned Jalen Hale as a guy who would be in the mix. There's a lot of talent, so there's not really – I don't think there's a need to worry yet about there being no talent or no players in this Alabama wide receiver room. They just haven't gotten a chance yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. And kind of switching gears a little bit, the receiving room, I don't think has been affected by injury, but you got to wonder too, like maybe some of those guys are a little banged up, the older guys, and that's why some of those younger guys are getting an opportunity. And that kind of leads me to the next topic I wanted to cover is Kalen DeBoer's pro-scrimmage press conference, because he kind of ran down some of those injuries a little bit. He talked specifically about two players, Jam Miller and Jaden Roberts, but you talk about holding some players out and not pointing out any significant setbacks. It's a little. I'm a little interested in that because after that first scrimmage, he talked about how healthy Alabama was. Then we go out to that practice the next day, and there are a ton of guys not practicing. But I think they are being cautious with a lot of players. And for you, Jimmy, when you hear about the injuries from Coach DeBoer, just what is the biggest takeaway from that?
Well, mostly good news. I mean, he's downplayed it. I noticed, like DeBoer has this. I don't know. It's almost a little Saban like you said before the first, after the first scrimmage. He's like, "Oh, we're really healthy. We're really fortunate." And then we all attend practice the next day, and about half the guys are out there, and the other half are in the training room. And then after the second scrimmage, they ask him about Jaden Roberts specifically. And he's like, "Oh yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be out there game one." And then his mom's on Twitter talking about his surgery, that he had. So DeBoer might downplay the injury situation a little bit, but that's okay. I'll just say to my limited knowledge, and I think you guys are on board with this. My limited knowledge, I can't name a guy other than Jalen Hale that I know is going to miss the first game. I mean, I'm not aware of anybody that's hurt to the point that they're going to be out. Now, that may be the case. There may be guys, but I don't know of it. And in that sense, I think Alabama's gotten through fall camp so far remarkably healthy, because I can name players at other schools who are out for multiple games, if not the season. So I think to this point, Alabama's been pretty lucky with avoiding that. But there has been bumps and bruises that you would associate with a long physical camp. But that to me is just normal.
Oh yeah, you're going to have guys that are dinged up. It's a part of football, and for them to practice now 15 times with only a few days off in between is to be expected. But maybe Daniel Hill, we've seen him in a sling. Haven't really seen him much at practice. That running back group was pretty thin early in the week this past week, but it sounds like guys like Richard Young were able to go on Saturday. That's a good sign. Jim Miller could have scrimmaged. So I think those top three at the running back spot are healthy. It'll be interesting to see just this week if anybody else is maybe not out there, because you want everybody to be healthy for game one, including Jaden Roberts. But let's be honest, Alabama's going to probably beat Western Kentucky by a sizable margin, and you don't necessarily need to rush people back when you have games at Wisconsin and Georgia right there on the horizon. That's just me talking. That's not coming from Coach DeBoer or anything like that. But for you, Blake, when you hear about the injuries, and he only mentioned a couple guys by name, what does it say about this team that they are in a good spot going into the last week of preseason?
I think it's, again, very encouraging because, like Jimmy said, you look around not just the country, but even the SEC. You've got guys dropping like flies that are like sizable, notable contributors on these teams. I think of Texas most notably, with two of their top running backs going down. And also you can think back to there have been multiple years where Alabama has had significant guys go down in fall camp and have to miss either sizable portions of the season or the season altogether. So for us to be going into the last week of fall camp without an injury like that, I think is pretty notable, because aside from Jalen Hale, who got hurt in spring, nobody else has suffered a season-ending or even a substantial injury that's going to keep them out for a long time. You mentioned Jam Miller. I think DeBoer said that he could have gone, but they held him out for precautionary reasons. So I'm sure if instead of a scrimmage, if it was Western Kentucky and Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday, he probably would have suited up. And then Jaden Roberts, he said he'd be ready for week one. But even then with Roberts, you have a pretty suitable replacement with Michigan State transfer Gino Vandemark back there as a guy who's played all three interior offensive line spots and can slot in if needed, especially against a lesser opponent like Western Kentucky, if we're just calling it like it is. So it's definitely encouraging to know that there's not you haven't had a quarterback hurt. You haven't had one of the two main inside linebackers hurt. You haven't had a DB hurt, an area that's already inexperienced, and you're trying to figure out who's the guy there. So you haven't seen those, and so I think that's good news for sure headed into the last week of fall camp.
Yeah, you mentioned the inside backers. I think you have a little PTSD when you think back to when Dylan Moses and Josh McMillan get hurt right before the start of the season, and you have to play two true freshmen in Christian Harris and Shane Lee. So I think if you're Kalen DeBoer and the staff, you feel good, but you're also holding your breath this week. And I don't know how intense these practices will be. It sounds like this last scrimmage was the most intense, and he's talked about the need and the desire to stay healthy. So I think that's going to be a primary focus heading into this last week. And another thing too, we'll kind of close out on this with the press conference. I'll start with you, Jimmy. He talked about the position battles kind of interest. I asked him about the corners. He was asked about right tackle. So starting with the cornerbacks, he had glowing reviews. And granted, Kalen DeBoer has been a guy that hasn't been very negative about anything when he's been, behind the microphone. But I think hearing how the corners performed in the scrimmage and then the progress they've made from practice 1 through practice 15 has to be pretty encouraging for a group that's pretty young.
He, anytime anyone asks about Zabian Brown, in particular, anytime Zabian comes up, DeBoer speaks of Zabian in glowing terms. I mean, he's ready to hand him the Oscar. I mean, he likes Zabian a lot. But then he also mentions Jalen Ibakwe and Deshaun Jones, and I think that very likely is going to go into the season, and you can call it a competition, or you can call it, sharing snaps even. I mean, we'll see how long it goes in the season. Maybe you play multiple guys well into the year until you settle on one, if you ever do. That might even be the situation at right tackle. DeBoer, every time that he talks about right tackle, he talks about playing more than one guy. Coach Cap, when we've interviewed him post-practice, has mentioned playing more than two tackles. He's mentioned it both times he's met with the media. Doesn't sound like this group is shy about that. Let's be honest, in a bigger philosophical picture, now that you're got 12 games and might have a playoff where you're playing multiple games, building depth and having multiple guys you can depend on is more important than ever. And I'm not saying they're going to play more guys specifically because of the playoff, but if you are going to play more than two tackles and more than two corners, it's a good time to be doing it, because who knows how many players you'll need to get through the whole season.
Yeah, you got to get guys ready in this day and age of college football. And, you talked about Coach Cap and the mention of a rotation at right tackle. Mo Linguist has mentioned that at corner, that could linger into the season. They want to play multiple guys. And, I think for Zabian Brown, I think Coach DeBoer is continuing to pump him with confidence. I think he's played well. I don't think he's just out there struggling. That's why he's doing it. I think, though, for a young guy, you always try to do that, especially whenever you're speaking in front of the media and that thing gets back to the players. But I think it's also interesting that when he's asked specifically about Zabian Brown, he brings up Deshaun Jones, kind of unsolicited. And I think that's kind of your top two at that spot, opposite of Damani Jackson right now. I wouldn't be shocked if the older guy gets to start against Western Kentucky, but I also wouldn't be shocked if both guys play, and maybe it's different the next week. It's just kind of, you're still filling this thing out. All these guys are new to the program. Zabian's new to college football. Deshaun Jones is new to Tuscaloosa coming in the summer. So I think that's a group that could maybe take some lumps early just because of how green they are, not just to college football, but to the program. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. And then I know, Blake, you wrote about the right tackles after the scrimmage. Just where do things stand there, and what were your takeaways from what he had to say?
Yeah, Jimmy touched on it a little, but both DeBoer and Coach Cap, the offensive line coach, have said that this is a competition that they have no problem with continuing into the season. And they like both of their options with Wilkin Formby and Elijah Pritchett at that right tackle spot. It kind of seems like the rest of the offensive line is settled with you've got both guards returning. You've got Parker Brailsford is now slotted in and seems comfortable at center. And Caden Proctor has taken over his left tackle position once again from last season after transferring back, spending the spring in Iowa. But at right tackle, you've got two capable guys and two guys who have different strengths, and both guys need improvement in different areas. That's what Coach Cap was telling us whenever we talked to him late last week. But he, again, has no problem continuing the competition into the season. And he said, if we have to play 3 tackles, then we have to play 3 tackles, and that is what it is. I think they just want to get these guys game reps because, like Jimmy said, like if you get late into the season, depth is really important with the potential of playing 15, 16, 17 games in a college football season now, on top of the rigor of an SEC schedule being more difficult this year than it ever has been, with the lack of divisions, the additions of Texas and Oklahoma, the more difficult schedules. Alabama's got probably one of the toughest road schedules this year than they've ever had in the history of the program. And so you want a deep roster. And so I don't really see a point in naming a starter right now on August 18th when you can put both guys out there and get them both game reps, especially with how the schedule sets up. I mean, with Western Kentucky and South Florida, we know the difficulties South Florida gave them last year under very interesting circumstances. But both of those 2 games before a road trip to Wisconsin and then a game against Georgia after that, you have 2 games where you can get guys a lot of game reps that are really important, because that's going to go much further than 11 on 11 in practice is going to go. And so same with the corners. I expect both Jones and Brown to get a lot of time there. Like, there are going to be guys splitting snaps, and that's going to be important because once you see how these guys are in a game, you can kind of move closer to making those decisions when they see film against other teams.
Yeah, we'll see what this upcoming week holds, if anything, from a a competition standpoint gets settled. It doesn't sound like they're in a hurry with any of that stuff. And like you've both talked about, it's been a situation where they're okay with the rotation word. But just kind of a preview of what's to come. They're off today. They're off tomorrow. They're back on the practice field Tuesday, and they'll have 5 practices. And Tuesday is really the last fall camp practice because classes start up on Wednesday. And then, you have the 20-hour week goes into effect. And so they'll practice Tuesday through Saturday, take Sunday off, and we're at game week, folks. And before we get there, though, we have one more day of practice viewing. And I know we've covered a lot, and it might be something we've talked about already, but going into this last week before game week, what is maybe the biggest position you're watching? It doesn't have to be a position. It could be a player. It could be anything. What is the thing, Jimmy, you're most interested to learn in this last week of the preseason?
Sort of a boring answer, but I've given this so many times just because for me it's just crucial, and that's just Jalen Milroe's comfort with the new offense. Yep. I mean, I think if Alabama achieves great things in 2024, it's because Jalen Milroe was incredibly comfortable with this new offense and the new coaching he's getting. And if the season goes a little sideways, it might have been because Milroe and others had difficulty in adapting to the new offense, throwing it more, just a different offense altogether, different scheme, different reads. I think that's just going to tell so much of the story for 2024 that here at the last minute, that's what I'm interested in. And so far, so good. I've heard from multiple sources at scrimmages and practices that we've attended that Milroe's been really good, that he's been really good, and that even some people that weren't really sure about Jalen have been, they think the kid's playing with more confidence. And to me, that tells me he's comfortable. So Jalen Milroe continuing to be comfortable with the new offense, to me, that's what I'm looking for, because to me, that's what's going to tell the story of this season for Alabama.
I listened back to the show you guys did on Friday, you and Tim Watts and Andrew Bone, and y'all brought up the story I wrote about 6 players to watch in that last scrimmage. And I wrote Jalen Milroe in that. And I'm glad that you kind of expounded on that, because I think he has had a really good fall camp. Coach DeBoer praised him after the 4th practice. He had a really good first scrimmage. I think he had a really good second scrimmage. He's just kind of continually going up just in terms of his trajectory. And if he is confident in this offense, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this fall. So I like that pick. For you, Blake, going into this last week, I know we have a few days of interviews actually, and then 1 day of practice. What's got your interest this last week of the preseason?
Yeah, it's a group we haven't really talked about on this show, but I think the defensive line has piqued my interest a lot as a group that has gotten a lot of praise from Kalen DeBoer, kind of unprompted too. He's just been like, I think the defensive line is doing really well. He got asked a question about the offensive line after the scrimmage on Saturday and started talking about the defensive line and how well they had played against the run in that scrimmage. He's talked about the pass rush. We've heard great things about LT Overton and what he's been doing in the scrimmages specifically. And I think he adds a nice element of depth to that defensive line. And you've got a lot of veteran, experienced players on that group with Tim Smith, Jaheim Otis, Jamarian Latham. There's a ton of guys, Tim Keenan. There's a ton of guys that have played a lot of snaps, played a lot of football on that defensive line. So it's a deep group, and you're going to have a group that can rotate more so than they've been able to do in recent years. You can think similar to those kind of, maybe not as talented, but those mid to late 2010s defensive lines that almost had new bodies in every couple of downs with the way that they could rotate and stay fresh. So that group, I think if they're as good as DeBoer has made them out to be, and they're able to wreak as much havoc as maybe these coaches have been talking about, that's going to take pressure off of that really green secondary. And if they're able to get home on pass downs, if they're able to force third and longs, I think that's going to be really helpful for this defense. And it's kind of a group that I think has gone under the radar because there's no like active starting position battles going on with them. It's just a lot of guys that have played a lot of football and a lot of guys who are very experienced and should gel together really well as a unit going forward.
Yeah, it's a deep group, no doubt. And this BOL staff, man, it's a deeper group now, too, now that we got Blake on the team. How's that for a segue? But nice. No, we're really happy to have you, Blake. It's been a lot of fun this first weekend. We got a lot of fun things in store. I know we have a week coming up, but game week's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be here before we know it. It's crazy to say out loud, but I know you guys as Alabama fans are excited for that, and we'll have it all covered over at BOL. But if you're enjoying the YouTube content, man, just be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever these new videos come up. I know Tim Watts and Andrew Bone have some more recruiting talk to come, and maybe they'll get on with Jimmy again and talk about some more drinks and TV. I know that was a lot of fun.
I want to do the whole hour on it. The bosses won't let me.
Well, we'll try to incorporate that in the next time that we're together. But I wanted to do this quick show with Blake coming off of that first scrimmage and welcoming him to the team. But we'll have plenty more to talk about. So for Charlie Potter, for Blake Byler, and for Jimmy Stein, thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next time.